The next day, John was there again with 2 of his disciples. When he saw Jesus passing by, he said, "Look, the Lamb of God." When the 2 disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and asked, "What do you want?" They said, "Rabbi, where are you staying?" "Come," he replied, "and you will see." So they went and saw where he was staying, and they spent that day with him. Over the past 2 to 3 years, I have found my head turned and my heart caught by the transformative glimpse of God I have experienced through Christian community. Like the 2 disciples, I have felt this glimpse feed a deeper curiosity, prompting me to follow and ultimately be invited to come and see. To this end, this 2023, I am embarking on a 6-month journey to dwell with various Christian communities. On the way, I'll be sharing interviews with community members, founders, and leaders to learn more about the blessings, challenges, and wisdom these dwelling places of God hold. In doing so, I hope to inform how it is we might nurture people and communities to be transformative manifestations of God, offering a glimpse of the divine and inviting people to come and see God's loving dwelling place.
Martin Newell, I'm a Passionist priest, Catholic priest. Introduce myself. I was born in Walthamstow, a few miles away. I was originally ordained for my home diocese, joined the Passionists just over 20 years ago. I was a founder member of the London Catholic Worker in 2001. I lived and worked full-time in the Catholic Worker for 7 years as a Passionist. Moved to Birmingham for 7 years to do a similar thing, similar kind of work, but with another Passionist in the Passionist community in Birmingham. He died a couple of years ago. It was quite after a sort of short illness with cancer. So I moved back here basically after closed that house, and then I moved back here a year and a half, September 21.
And who are the Passionists?
A religious order, charism focused on keeping alive the memory of the Passion.
And are they linked to Catholic Worker?
Only through me, really, but yeah. Okay. I'm slightly more than that. The Passionists, we started something a few years ago we call Passionist Partners, which is a range of organisations that we at Passionists say share something of the Passionist spirit in some way, and that we already had a connection with through different members of the province. And Passionists give grants to those partner groups, most of them.
And is it an order of just priests, or...?
It's a clerical order, so mostly priests. There are some brothers, but it's mainly priests. Yeah.
And would you mind sharing about the history of Catholic Worker? Because I feel like it has an impressive history, which would be worth hearing about.
The movement as a whole started in New York City in 1933. Dorothy Day was a kind of anarchist communist type who became a Catholic and was searching for a way to... She kept her social, political convictions essentially, but obviously had religious convictions, if you like that.
So she converted to...
She became a Catholic, from... Well, she was never an atheist, really, but she's from a non-religious background. And she met Peter Morin, who was a homeless French Catholic peasant intellectual, I'd say. She was searching for something, and he gave her a mission really to start a newspaper in his phrase, to explode the dynamite of Catholic social teaching. And she was a journalist, so that worked. And he had this programme of action, 3-pronged programme of action, House of Hospitality for the poor and homeless, round table discussions for the clarification of thought, and communal farms. This was during the Great Depression in the United States, so mass unemployment and homelessness. So communal farms were people giving people somewhere to live and also some work to to produce what was needed. So basically, people started coming looking for these houses for hospitality. Some of them were looking for some help. Others were maybe unemployed also, but looking to help, and people started spending money. So they hadn't really planned to start a movement. They just were starting a newspaper, but it just kind of started of its own accord. And they started that house in New York City, and then other groups around the US started their own communities and houses and projects, and it kind of went from there, really. Important. So it was a Catholic paper with a political message. Dorothy Day called it the Catholic response to the Daily Worker, which would have been a Marxist paper. Stories about social justice and injustice and what Catholics should do about it. And also Dorothy and Peter were both pacifists, so the movement became a pacifist movement, which has been well known for that over the 90 years of its existence as well. Didn't really take off. It was mainly an American movement. Didn't really take off elsewhere much. There has been various Catholic worker presences in this country. There was a newspaper. There have been some communities, but when I first heard about the Catholic worker movement in 1989, there was nothing in this country of the Catholic worker movement.
Any in Europe or elsewhere, or was it really
in 1989,
just America?
It wasn't. I didn't know at that time, but it wasn't anything else in Europe in 1989. But I think the first European communities since then, well, the house in Oxford started in 1993, and then there's two communities in Germany and one in the Netherlands, both started around the same time, early mid-90s, something like that.
Yeah, but it's quite an old community, Catholic worker, if it has its origins in 1933.
Yeah. So this community here, the London Catholic Worker Group started in end of 2000, beginning of 2001. We didn't have a community house or anything like that, but we started meeting and praying and Bible studies and planning and doing actions and stuff. And eventually we got a small, eventually, so a few of us were available to move and to start a community house and a house of hospitality in London, in East London, originally in Hackney, and then also two couples originally from that group went and started the Catholic Worker Farm in Hertfordshire. So that original group spawned two houses. And we moved so originally we had a small house for 4 years in Hackney and a community cafe 3 days a week in a crypt of an Anglican church.
And was that donated property or?
We were paying the house also belonged to the Anglican church, and they were renting it to us at a below market rent without not asking too many questions about who was living there. And we also were running a soup kitchen on a Sunday afternoon in Hackney that we'd started a few months before the house started. So we then, after 4 years, we were offered this place, and then the community had grown, and we were able to. For a while, we kept both houses running, but that was for about 3 years, and the cafe. But then we just closed those two projects. And been here since 2010. So 13 years, coming up to 13 years here. And the soup kitchen that we started is still running, but we don't run it anymore. I think there's a bit of a community cafe going in the crypt of the church where we started that as well, but not quite as much. But that's something of that still going as well.
And how does it work to get? Do you get Catholic worker accreditation in a way? What means that you take the name?
Anybody can call themselves a Catholic worker.
Okay.
I went to a meeting of Christian communities once with someone who was involved in the Oxford community was talking about the Catholic worker, and somebody said, "Well, why did you choose that name?" Well, no, people don't like the word Catholic, and people don't like the word worker. And I was like, well, that's why it's a good name, because anybody can take it, but you wouldn't take it unless you really believed in it, because it's not a very on their own, they're not very popular words, and together, you put together, they're even less popular. So, which is just as well, considering that there's nothing stopping anybody from using it. So I think that kind of works quite well, really.
Yeah. So there's no kind of formal getting together with other Catholic worker communities.
Well, we do get together. Just last month there was a European Catholic worker gathering.
Okay.
Tom and Natalie both went, and Nora and her partner, whose name slips my mind right now, but anyway, Woody, they all went. Nora used to live here. They all went to the Netherlands for this European gathering. In the US, they have 3 or 4 regional gatherings. I think maybe, I'm not sure if they're every year, and then they have a national gathering every so often. And there's lots of interchange really between different Catholic worker communities.
Yeah, but there's no structure or formal leadership.
There's no formal
and things.
Structure.
Yeah.
But as I do belonging to a religious order, I'd see like the Catholic worker has lots. In reality, it hasn't got the formal structures, but it's got many of the realities that religious orders have that make them into a kind of cohesive body. There's a definite charism. There's people moving between houses and communities. There's gatherings. People get together and talk about what it is to be a Catholic worker, and argue about it and stuff like that.
And do people formally become a Catholic worker member, or do people just kind of float in and out of the communities? Is there any sense of promises that are made, or
I think some communities do have promises. I seem to remember some years ago somebody from one of the German communities saying she was a novice in their community. I think they would have a year. They had a year before you became a full member. I think that's what you were a trial member for a year. And then here we've never done that here exactly, but we did have. Things are changing now, but we used to have a core group here when I wasn't living here. And there was a de facto core group when I was living here actually, but we didn't have a name for it. But we had a core group here, and if you wanted to stay in for more than a year, you had to join the core group and commit for another year at least. Yeah. So if you didn't want to commit joining the core group and staying another year, you're supposed to leave. Yeah. So there was a kind of like a trial period, if you like, but most people don't. I'll say there are people that do it for life, but there's also most people do it for a certain part of their life.
And each different Catholic worker navigates that in their own way.
Each community does it their own way.
Yeah. And would you mind talking about the Catholic worker here that we're currently based at, and describing, how what is the Catholic worker here, or what does it look like here?
So, the building we're in belongs to Westminster Diocese. It was a parish which got closed down. We're in the former presbytery here. Next door, we got the church building, which was built by the Methodists, and because it was a Methodist church, there's lots of other rooms around it, in the basement and around the hall at the back, a big hall.
Maze, isn't it?
So when we first came here, it had been empty. Parish was closed down. For a few years, it was empty, and then the diocese were looking for some charities to take it on, but nobody else wanted to do it. They were only offering a 2-year lease and needed a lot of work doing to it. So most charities were like, well, we'd have to spend all this money on it before we could take it on. So we just said, we'll just start and do it as we go. That's what we did. So initially we were running a night shelter, a very basic night shelter, for up to 20 male destitute asylum seekers, sleeping on light mattresses on the floor in the church hall. And the Catholic work community, basically living in this house and working and trying to getting the building sorted out and getting lots of things organised, running the night shelter and doing the activism, which is part of the Catholic worker movement, practice, tradition these days for a long time. So it ran as a very basic night shelter for the first 4 years. After 4 years, Johannes worked out that we had enough rooms that were in good enough order to use, that the guests, we call them the men in the night shelter, could have proper beds in bedrooms, 3 to a room, pretty crowded. But it was still a night shelter. They still had to go out for some hours during the day. So I had like cooks coming in to cook, volunteer cooks coming in to help cook in the evening and that. Just before COVID, there was a revisioning process started here, and then COVID came and all the night shelters had to close in the whole country. And because 5 of the guests were able to stay, because there were 5 rooms, they had to be social distancing. You couldn't have more than 1 person per room. So 5 stayed, but they obviously couldn't go out during the day. So it stopped being a night shelter at that point anyway, for that time. But then we decided not to go back to being a night shelter. So now it's a community house. We've only got, instead of 20 guests at the moment, we've only got 9. We're working to create more rooms. There's plenty of internal space if we can divide it up to make more rooms, which we're in the process of doing. We've made a start and there's more work to do on that. The 9 guests, asylum seekers living here now, currently 4 in the live-in community. Another one, young volunteer, coming in a couple of weeks. And we in the past we've done a lot of activism, anti-war, anti-arms trade, anti-nuclear, that kind of thing. There's a monthly vigil at the Home Office for people who have died crossing the Mediterranean or the English Channel. Yeah, trying to seek a safer place of safety, you know. In more recent times, it's been a hub for climate activism here, and also for a while Palestine Action stuff was organised by someone here. So not much of that is happening at the moment. Kind of hoping it might be able to get back to some of that in the future. There's peaks and troughs of things, you know. We're kind of just getting on our feet still again post-COVID, really.
And who is the we when you say that we here? Is there a like core community of full members? There's a mix of full members, guests. How does that work?
Yeah. So there's different we's, I guess. There's some different we's. So all of us includes all of us who live here. Then so we have for example, we have a house meeting every week, every Monday evening. So that's for everybody. So you could say
about 12 of you at the moment.
13, yeah. So 13, yeah. So that's, you could say, the house community. The Catholic worker community would be, I said there's 4 of us, but of those 4, 2 are working outside and contributing financially. Yeah. And then there's what you might call the team. Yeah. The team is those of us who are working here full time. So 2 of us doing that at the moment. And when the volunteer comes in a couple of weeks, he'll be a member of the team. Yeah. But also we've never been any formal registered organisation of any kind, charity or anything. But we are in the process of registering the house, Giuseppe Conlon House, as a registered charity, not the Catholic Worker. Catholic Worker group will be something distinct from that. So once that is done, then there'll be a board of trustees. We've got we call it a transitions group. That's kind of effectively a kind of a shadow board at the moment, I suppose, in terms of accountability and making big decisions. That's kind of like an informal kind of board, I suppose you'd say, for the first. Yeah.
And the team, how are they financially supported? Is that just from the members who are working outside of the community, or does the diocese?
Yeah, we get the diocese give us the place for free. Yeah. It's on what they call a self-repairing lease, so we have to do all the maintenance, pay the maintenance. So we don't have any rent to pay. We produce a newsletter 4 times a year, which is Catholic Worker started as a newspaper. So most Catholic work communities produce a newsletter, website, social media, that sort of thing.
They don't have to, but that's part of the culture.
It's kind of how you get your money. So, so we get most of our income is donations from the mailing lists, and we get lots of food donated and stuff like Harvest Festival collections, local shops that give us food donated and stuff like that. And the two people who are working outside currently are contributing financially as well. That's a new kind of fairly new. We did when we first came here, we had someone in a similar position to that, but this is the first time since then that's been the case. So I get supported by my passionist order because I still have various passionist responsibilities. So it's kind of like my spending money, if you like, comes from the passionist, but if you like, broadly speaking, if you like, board and lodging, if you like, is provided here. The passionists provide my other expenses.
And if you weren't part of an order, it is a kind of...
The community would be my pocket money,
Well, that's amazing.
It's a very simple life.
And would you mind describing the rhythms that the house here share as a community?
We pray together in the morning 6 days a week, not on Sundays because we go to mass and whatever on Sunday. We pray together at normally 8 o'clock in the morning for about 45 minutes.
The Catholic.
We just normally read the readings of the day from the lectionary and have some silent meditation, and we say morning prayer. Not from the office, but from this other book called Common Prayer, which is very simple. It's good for people coming in who haven't had experience this type of prayer before. The other one's a bit
very good ecumenical.
And it's very easy to use. You just turn the page to the next day. That's what.
Unlike some of the some of the prayer books.
So we do evening prayer after dinner. We have evening prayer from the office. So we just about managed to cope with that. And some people aren't used to these things. That's what we do at the moment. Things change when people come when different community members come and go. It changes, depending on what people want to do. So morning prayer, like 8 to 8:45, and for the Catholic worker community, whoever's here or not at work, whatever.
Do the guests join in?
They don't know. I mean, the odd guest has at times joined in, but on the whole, most of the guests are African or whatever. If they are Christian, then it's not really their way of praying. If they want to pray, there are different ways of praying, really. On the whole, not always. Sometimes they join in. Breakfast after prayer, and then it's just like whatever work we need to do for the day, really. If we get our act together, we might have a light lunch together in the hall at about 1 o'clock. If we get our act together, if we're here for that. Dinner in the evening, 6:30. The rule for all of us is if we're in the house, we have to be at the table. We don't have to eat. So that applies to the guests as well. But everybody who's here at the time has to be at the table. It's a way of trying to build community and mutual support. So it's not just us supporting the guests, but they're supporting each other. Having a better quality of life, I think, as a result of that. And Monday evenings we have a house meeting, which everybody has to be there, which is the one meal of the week. Dinner first, everybody has to be there, unless it's something really important that they have to do. And then we have a house meeting, discuss any business of the house, do a cooking rota. So everybody, including the guests, has to take a turn on the cooking rota and the cleaning of the house and various things that need to be done. We ask their help, and they're very willing to help normally for different things that need to be done.
And you get a lot of food donations from the area?
Yeah, well, we used to get more, but there's not so many of us here at the moment. So every week we get a whole load of bread, cakes, pastries, and like sausage rolls and stuff from a very upmarket bakery in Stroud Green. Very nice bread, proper bread. And we share it. We get far more than we can use, so we share that with 3 other charities, like a soup kitchen and a couple of food banks. So that supplies us with our bread and a lot of these pastries and cakes and donuts and stuff for the week, sandwiches and stuff. and then we get Harvest Festival donations, and then some of the guests also go to various places where they get given food for themselves, and they bring it back and share it with the house. And then we've got there's a couple of other, there's at least, and then people just bring around random things, sort of thing, you know. People that we know just bring stuff around for us, really. We used to get like fruit and veg from a shop down on Green Lanes here, but I think they just got a bit fed up with it, really. That was a long time, many years. There is a Fresh and Wild Estate Newington that if we have the capacity to go down there, then we could get some from there as well. But we haven't really needed to in recent times. We haven't had capacity either. So.
And you just present yourselves as what kind of a charity?
As a charity, informal charity, and we can't register as a charity, but anyway, because of our political activity as the Catholic worker. That's why the Giuseppe Conlon House can be registered as a charity, but the political the Catholic worker group as a distinct group would have to carry out the political stuff. But,
and how do you find the guests take to the community rhythms? Because with a lot of communities, you sign up to this way of life, and therefore you do what the community does. How do you find that the guests take to the rhythms?
I mean, different personalities. Obviously, some people like it straight away. A lot of people are a bit hesitant to start with, but once they get settled in a bit and they get to know people, my normal experience is that, well, there's people who are in the house a lot. They're happy to come to the meals and that. And people are out a lot, just out a lot. If they're out, it's fine. It's not a problem. Yeah. As long if they're doing something with their life, that's good. But it's better than staying in the house, getting bored and depressed, really. So, but yeah, we get to know each other by sitting at the table together, by having the house meetings, by obviously we're working, trying to help advocacy and trying to help their guests with their immigration situation to the extent we can. Not immigration advisors, so we don't do that, but signposting and stuff like this. So we help writing letters for them and stuff, helping them understand what it is they need, where they should go and this sort of thing. So we, as the team, if you like, in particular, have dealings with them on that basis, as well as sort of sitting around the table. We have occasional kind of community. Well, one of the things we've had to do in the last year or so is a lot of, I always say, I started saying this when I was here before, that it turns out that a big part of the Catholic worker vocation is moving stuff around, getting donations in, sorting them, moving them, like getting old furniture falls apart, you've got to get rid of it. Yeah. And people give you donations, you get a lot of stuff you don't want really, so it's processing it. And because we've been resetting the house post-COVID and changing from a night shelter, there's been a lot of moving stuff and sorting stuff and decorating and painting and these things. So when we get Harvest Festival donations, for example, that all needs to be put away. So we try and do that as group activity, like a house activity, say after a house meeting, we'll get things ready and like, can you all help move all this stuff? So when we do that kind of communal activity, it's good for building community as well, community bonds. So.
And it sounds like you, this evening you're watching football and having a barbecue.
Yeah. My Champions League final tonight, Tom and Natalie have organised a barbecue. They've got some family coming over. We watch football together. That's obviously a popular activity when that's on. Sometimes it might be a day trip out somewhere, whatever. But we're not forcing people to join in with these things if they don't want to. The only thing they have to come to the house meeting. They have to sign up to the cooking rota. Yeah. And the day they're cooking, they have to sit at the table as well because they're there. They can't just disappear out. And they have to do some cleaning in the house. And they have to be honest with us about, talk to us about what's going on with their immigration situation. But it's just, it works. Yeah. It works. Yeah.
And the guests, do they get referred to you by other charities?
Yeah, so we have a list of what we call referral partners, so about 9 or 10 organisations that we take referrals from. Most of our guests, we have some very short-term guests, but mostly maybe a year or more. We take people initially for a year if things are going well in their house and if there's a prospect of their immigration being sorted out in the not too distant future, then we'll extend it. So we don't have lots of vacancies in terms of referrals, but that's how we get from other refugee or homelessness day centres like Crisis as well, or the Manor Centre, or the Passage, or St Martin in the Fields as well. I don't think St Martin in the Fields are on the list, but refugee organisations like the Red Cross, yeah.
And it's beautiful that you're able to support the 13 people here on donations and the people working and the stuff. Yeah, just living on God's providence.
Yeah, most of the virtual our furniture is donated as well, and most of the equipment is either donated or some. We've had to buy a couple of second-hand computers recently, but we've had a lot of donation stuff over the years, and people that volunteer their labour for maintenance work as well. You might have seen happening out there. So.
And how was it when you started London Catholic Worker in the kind of 2000s? Because I think once you're established, you start getting more donations because people know who you are. How was it starting?
Well, I'd saved up about £7,000 before I joined the Passionists, which I'd given to my brother to look after because I couldn't keep it for that purpose. And he also my brother had £60,000 saved up, which him and his wife were planning to use to build an extension on their house. But then he decided they didn't need to do that and they would give us the money. For that purpose. That was really generous. Yeah. The Passionists gave some early funding as well, partly as my living costs, if you like. That was the kind of my brother's money in particular, and my bit of money was the kind of seed funding, if you like, that kept us going long enough that by the time that ran out, our regular income had gone up to a level that we broke even. Our bank balance went down to £3,000 at one point when the original money had dried up, had been used up rather, and when we were still running the two houses, that was another reason why we had to close the other house. We couldn't afford to keep both going, as well as not having enough people. So it's a straightforward decision in the end. So we had that time to build up the regular income from the mailing list. Yeah. And
currently there are 4 on the team, I think, and 2 are more recent, Natalie and Tom.
Tom's been around this community for about 4 years, in and out. He was doing a PhD and he had to finish that and stuff. And he's recently got married, so Natalie's wife's moved in. And then Colette is the Westminster Diocese Justice and Peace Worker, so that's her work. Which obviously there's an overlap between her work and our work, so that works well. And then she contributes financially as well. They're very much part of the community, as well.
And have you had many people join over the years? Because you don't actively advertise or recruit members. It's just
on our website it does say at the top we're always looking for community members and volunteers. I guess how do I say? I think we produce newsletters which we send to every Catholic church in London, and we are kind of activists, so our name gets out and about, and we do talks and we do things, and obviously Dorothy Day is increasingly well known, and since we've been going, I think by our presence, the Catholic Worker movement has become more well known. But I think it's really Dorothy Day that attracts people. It's not us, on the whole. Sometimes there are people that get in touch and sort of think, oh, well, actually I'd like to try this out. But usually people are inquiring about the Catholic Worker movement in general. And, but it's here in London, so they can connect with it. So there's always, I think, there's always people interested in the Catholic Worker movement. It's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
It's unusual, etc. So it does attract people who are looking for something. They hear about Dorothy Day, they hear about the movement. It's like, as I said, there's similarities to being part of a religious order. I think if we were I've known other people in individual Christian communities, and they're not, because nobody knows they're there, or what it's about, and people don't inquire about joining because why would you? But being part of a bigger movement that's got an identity and a profile, and people know what it is, or they think they know what it is, and they're attracted by Dorothy Day's writing in particular, and other things in the history of the Catholic worker movement, then that's how we get our members, really. So there's been lots of people through here over the years. Connor, who was here with me for 3 years, from 2010, and his partner Joanna, they run a similar house in Tottenham. It's just the two of them, but they run a house of hospitality. They do some activism. It's very similar. But they don't call it a Catholic worker as such, but it's basically the same sort of thing. So there are people that have kind of graduated on to do similar things in other places.
I think communities have that really powerful effect that you often get people who've done a community programme or have lived in community for a while and then it seeds. Lots of different things, which is beautiful to see.
So we don't go out in one sense to actively recruit, but we do normally go out kind of, over the years we've done a lot of just promoting the fact that we're here and what we do, and then hoping that attracts people, essentially, which it has done over the years.
And in those 20 plus years, have you been the only common denominator? And if so, how does that feel for you?
That is true. Well, Scott at the Catholic Worker Farm, he was part of the original Catholic Worker group, and he's still at the Catholic Worker Farm. So the two of us have been in terms of the overall picture, have been the constant denominators. How does it feel to me? Well, I wasn't here for 7 years. I was in Birmingham for 7 years, but I was still at that time we had a core group, like 3 people living members of the core group, and 3 external, which kind of functioned as a board in a way, that group. So I was on the core group. I was still involved in the work of the house to some extent, but I wasn't living here. So it pretty much ran. The community pretty much ran itself most of that time. There were some of the very long-term things that needed to be done that I took responsibility for, but I didn't. So that was great. That I was delighted that it was possible for me to do a similar thing in a passionist context, and the community here continuing to flourish without me. That was brilliant. Yeah. It was a bit strange coming back. But kind of feels like things are regenerating again. One of the words people talk about in the Catholic worker is precarity, based on precariousness, obviously. And Dorothy Day talked about precarity in a sense that in talking about voluntary poverty, but I think there's also a precarity that's about, it's all very precarious because people come and go and you never know who's going to be here in a year's time or whatever, or 2 years' time. But it seems to continue. Yeah,
it's very countercultural in a world where you kind of get funneled into having a full-time job, a mortgage, a pension.
So I think there's a book about the Catholic worker called, certainly a phrase, I've seen but I think there's a book called The Catholic Worker and the Miracle of Its Continuance. This is some kind of miracle. I think it's the Holy Spirit. It's a charism that that keeps attracting people, and it's a formation experience for a lot of people that pass through and take it with them. Very powerful formation experience for a lot of people, I think. Yeah.
And what inspired you to set up London Catholic Worker?
What inspired me? Well, I start. I don't need to go into all the story of how I discovered the Catholic worker movement, but I got on the mailing list. To cut a long story short, I had read the newspaper. I discovered about the movement. I was involved for a long time with another charity called the Simon Community, which had been started by Catholics in the 60s, which was running houses of hospitality for homeless people in this country. It wasn't pretending to be a Catholic worker community, but...
Are they still going?
It's still going in a much smaller form. They've just got one house left. They had like 4 or 5 houses, and they've only got one house left now. It's a charity for homeless people, essentially, and it's not a Catholic organisation or Christian organisation anymore. I think for a long time, but I was a living volunteer there, and I was involved with that from like varying degrees for about 20 years. So I'd experienced what it was to live in a house of hospitality. I knew that you could do it. I knew it was possible, and I think for a lot of people that's a big hurdle to get over. How can you live with all these homeless people, kind of thing? Well, actually, you can. There's different things about that, but it's not. So I knew that it wasn't. I knew that it wasn't impossible, and I really liked it. And then when I read the newspaper, the Catholic Worker paper, I just found it really incredibly inspiring and like nothing else I'd ever come across. And in terms of being Catholic, Christian, into social justice and peace and all that, but also being very upfront about it being a Catholic organisation and speaking in the language of faith and not kind of downplaying that, being very upfront about that, and taking up the kind of Catholic symbols and tradition and language and scriptural stuff in a very dynamic way that, engage with the kind of social and political issues of our time without any sense of it being either kind of not entirely authentic. It seems incredibly authentic and incredibly real and powerful, and I've just found that incredibly inspiring myself through reading the Catholic Worker and reading Catholic Worker materials, books and stuff. Also kind of became convinced that Jesus was a pacifist and therefore I should be a pacifist, and therefore committed to non-violent action. And and the combination of work for the poor and work for justice and peace in the same breath, almost, if you like, in the same communities, seems to be very important to me. And as a passionist, part of what sort of discerning what I should do as a passionist, part of the thing for me was I realised after a long time, that the Catholic when we first started the Catholic Worker Group in this country, I used to talk about the Catholic Worker to people, and they were like, "Oh yeah." The kind of general impression you got was that it was something that was happened in America and that finished about 1950. People didn't realise it was still going, and they certainly didn't realise it was a growing movement. And I didn't realise how big it was. So when I realised that the Catholic Worker movement in America, mainly, but also beginning in Europe, was growing, and there's so few. Even back then, like 20 years ago, there's so few Catholic or Christian movements committed to social justice and peace that were growing. Most of these things were dying. So, here's just something that actually attracts people and is dynamic. And I remember there was a Liverpool Catholic worker in the 90s, and Thomas Cullinan, who was a Benedictine monk, I remember him saying, he said, it's very strange. He said, all these people that come here, they'd never go anywhere near anything called Catholic normally, but they come here. And that's really true. Lots of people that wouldn't go anywhere near anything normally called Catholic are happy to get involved with the Catholic Worker. Yeah. So so I thought, well, that's at the very least, it's got to be worth a try to see if we can get this going. I just found it. I find it so inspirational. I think other people would do too, or would if they knew it was here. Because all these things seem to happen either a long way away, like in America, or a long time ago in the past. So how about trying it here and now in the present? And I think that'll, inspire people and attract people, and let's give it a go.
Yeah, and I wonder, I wonder do you have any ideas about what caused the decrease in those movements? And do you think that we're in a period of increase again?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you've heard of. I'm trying to think. I mean, obviously, Christianity and religious belief generally is a receding tide in Western Europe, and perhaps even more so in this country. And I don't think it's a struggle to know whether we can resist that, to what extent we can resist that. But I think probably as we get fewer in number, ordinary Catholics and Christians need more of these sorts of communities to gather around, really, because otherwise you just get so isolated in the society we live in. I mean, the Catholic Church in this country seems to be kind of on its last legs, really, frankly, in this country. unless things change drastically. And I can't. Whatever we do as a church, I doubt that's going to change. It's like trying to be King Canute and stop the tide going out. The fact that we're still here is a positive sign. I think we've managed. Well, I'd like to think that the existence of this community and the Catholic worker movement in this country has helped to inspire more Catholics to understand the social and political dimensions of the gospel. And I think it's true to say that more of the Christians and church-going Christians and Catholics that still exist in this country, more of us are socially and politically active because of our faith than we used to be, like in the past, and more than it would have been without us here. I'd like to think that's the case.
And what you said reminds me. Have you read Irresistible Revolution by Shane Claiborne?
Yeah, I've read that.
Yeah, and he mentions, well, his theory is that the way that we teach the gospel isn't challenging enough anymore, and therefore that people drop away from the faith, because what's the point in just rocking up to church every Sunday? It's not doing anything. But people being able to connect maybe more strongly to the social justice work, and yeah.
Yeah, I think it brings the gospel alive.
Yeah. It's what we're called to do as well.
Well, I think it was Pope Paul VI said people these days in the modern age, they don't just listen to teachers, they will listen. What they want is witnesses, and they'll listen to teachers in as much as they are witnesses. Yeah. So I think that's really true, even more so, as words are so cheap in the societies we live in. I have to say, I do also. I also think that Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor, for they shall inherit the kingdom, inherit the earth." We live in such a rich country, in such a rich society, that it shouldn't be any surprise that a gospel that has a preferential option for the poor is not popular with the wealthy and comfortable and well entertained masses. That shouldn't be a surprise, really. Yeah. The church is growing in the global south, and it's shrinking in most of the global north. Yeah. And I think that's what you would expect, frankly. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, how can we be faithful? This is a big part of our Catholic work. When I lived here before, a big part of our kind of discussions was like our question: how can we be faithful when we're living in Babylon? We're living in Rome in biblical terms.
And community, I think, helps with that. And I really like what you said about it brings the gospel alive. And I think that was my first living in community. The way I'd often describe it to people is that it's really brought the gospel alive to me. And so you've spent most of your life in community. Yeah. What draws you community, or what do you see in community which means that you've chosen this lifestyle?
Obviously, I'm celibate, obviously, so I think I don't want to live on my own. It's a very practical thing in one sense. But, that's my call. That's my vocation in a sense, isn't it? Priesthood and religious life and community. But I think there has to be a mission. There has to be, like Frank Cordaro, who until a few years ago was probably the best known Catholic worker in the US, would say, Catholic workers aren't very good at community. It's like we're not. Because in his American, he said, because we're Americans, we're just so individualistic. We're rubbish at it. But this is why we need community, to learn how to live with each other, how to relate to each other. And I think most of our guests are better at living in community than we are, because they don't come from such an individualistic culture that we do. So we need it. I don't think it's easy. I think, with the exception of kind of monastic type communities, I think there has to be a higher reason for living in community. If you're just in community for the sake of community, it's not going to work, because we're not. It's difficult. Community is difficult. We bump up against each other and we rub up against each other, and we're used to doing things our own ways, and we prefer it basically to do that. So unless there's some bigger force that's propelling us outwards away from each other, So it has to be something bigger that's drawing us in towards each other. And I think, the common work and the common charism that we have in the Catholic worker communities provides that to some extent. I mean, it's not a lifetime commitment, but it seems to keep going.
And with Colette, we were talking about the importance of prayer as well, which kind of regrounds you in,
yeah, of course,
in what it means to love.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I've lived in different sorts of communities, so it's different, but yeah. I think everybody's struggling with community, including religious orders are struggling. There's not many. I don't think there's any. Yeah, I think nearly everybody's struggling with community in the sense of either living it or attracting people to it, or keeping people in it that come. Nobody's finding it easy, whether it's any type of religious order, whether it's lay communities, whether it's Catholic worker. Nobody's finding it easy because we've got so many alternatives as part of it.
Yeah, but I do also think that there is an increasing interest, and I think people who have that experienced community, or as you were saying, you saw that it was possible, and then I think that has sparked interest in. I'm just thinking about people that I know who also have this interest in community, having experienced it. I think the way that society is going, people are realising that ultra individualism isn't offering all that it claims to offer. So
there's lots
see.
of. I don't know. I don't really have a sense of where things are going on that level, but I do know my sense of, for example, the United States is much more individualistic, I'd say, than Europe, than here, and I think they have more communities, and I think that's a reaction because people are looking for that basic human need, which is in the broader sense of the word community, not intentional community. Yeah. What you're talking about is intentional community. But in a broader sense, everybody needs community. That's how God created us. We need for each other. Yeah. We're not. God didn't create us as isolated individuals, so we need that. Yeah. So the more individualistic society gets, the more people, I think, look for.
The more we have to get intentional about it, and there's a sense in which, in the past or in other cultures, community just happens in a way that it doesn't anymore. Hence, I think the interest in intentional community, because it's one of the only ways to get it. As we close off, what would you summarise as some of the greatest blessings of your experience in community and some of the greatest challenges?
I think the greatest blessing really has been just challenge and inspiration to live faith more radically, I would say. That would be I like praying together. That's a great blessing to be able to pray together with other people that want to do that as well. And challenge is just getting on with each other, trying to work out decisions together, and to do that in ways that are sensitive to very different personalities. I suppose community life accentuates the positives and some of the negatives as well, because we bump up against each other. So
it's very helpful for learning about humanity. Learning about other people.
I think it's I suppose people might call it a colourful life, and therefore in comparison, mainstream life, suburban life, for example, is kind of grey in comparison, I think. But
and then I've called this podcast Dwelling Place, based on Psalm 84, and I've been asking people, where is it that God isn't only different places and basically everywhere, but where have you found God dwelling in community, your life in community?
in the people, I think. I think Dorothy Day was very strong on recognising the presence of seeing Christ in the poorest that we live and work with, and that's so primarily in them, but also in members of the community, the Catholic workers as well, and in the people primarily.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome.